The Austrian Grand Prix is over and the result is same old, same old. If you haven't seen it, you can guess what it was. If you have seen it, well, you know. But was something unusual this weekend in the paddock, in the media center, out on track, an unusual visitor. I mean, not so unusual, familiar to everybody in MotoGP, but Casey Stoner was here. Casey Stoner was here for a parade ride, and Casey Stoner was here to talk about MotoGP. He was invited to, take part in the proceedings here, so you would think potentially maybe he would go a bit easy in his opinions on MotoGP, its current state, its future state. And if you thought that, you probably don't know Casey Stoner all that well. I have to admit, we knew going into the arranged Stoner media session that there was probably going to be some emotion and some very forthright words being used about something, about one specific thing. Simon, what set Casey Stoner off this weekend?
MotoGP really couldn't have scripted it any worse. Deciding that the weekend to bring Casey Stoner was the same weekend that they were going to bring a new form of electronic rider aid, a new stability control that's essentially, to drill it down, traction control for slide rather than traction control for wheel spin out of a corner. It's another thing that the championship has brought on. They say for safety, they say to reduce the risk of high sides, but that a lot of the riders had already said was going to make racing more boring by taking more things out of the hands of the riders. And completely unsurprisingly, that was the trigger that we expected it to be for Casey Stoner, double world champion, to go off on a long-winded 24-minute rant about the state of the championship right now and how much of this whole thing has been taken out of the hands of the riders and into the hands of the engineers in particular and the electronics in general to give us, as we saw, a rather bland on-track show.
I don't know about that. Honestly, I thought the race was pretty good, but also we know that not everybody in the field has been using this slide control setting fully. It's still in the tuning process, and this wasn't exactly the biggest track for it. I don't think that was necessarily a factor. I think it's more, if you didn't like today's race action, it's more endemic of what today's MotoGP is, of what does work and of what doesn't work.
That's what Casey was getting at as a whole. It wasn't just the software in particular. The software was the trigger for all of his emotions about the state of MotoGP as it is right now. And actually, I think the race exactly reflected what he was talking about and how these safety controls are actually playing a big role in making MotoGP more dangerous, not safer. Because what we saw in the race today, Val, as you'll agree, was every overtake essentially was a do or die lunge on the brakes.
Yes.
And half of them left the guy that was either overtaking, trying to be overtook, or both of them off the track. And Stoner's whole point is that the more you make things controlled, the more that you make corner exit in particular more controlled with electronic support, with ride-height devices, the more that it becomes only one part of the entire lap where you can make an overtake, and that's a do-or-die braking maneuver.
Yeah, I think that's his argument was sort of two-part. That was the one part that I really think there's a lot of merit to it, also because it's not just about the electronics. I mean, Casey has been very outspoken on how he doesn't like, in his perception, that riders are just able to, line up corner exit and just go boom without really having to modulate it as much as you would have done in the past. And he feels that the riders who have an innate skill for that aren't necessarily being rewarded for that skill in modern MotoGP. I think one of the phrases he used was, we're making champions out of engineers, not riders. I don't think that's necessarily true this particular season, but I see what he's getting at. He also said that it's the old always motorsport argument that you get in a lot of series is, if you do something to make the machinery, the bike in this case, more compliant, you take away the fear of the extreme consequence, and people start taking more liberties with the machinery at hand. I don't know how much I agree with that necessarily. He used the phrase that, you don't have the high side anymore to put the fear in you and make you safer. But I think also shouldn't always take broken bones to ensure safety.
I think the point that he's making when he said that, because it sounds pretty brutal, I get it.
Yeah.
But I think the point that he was trying to make there is, if you high side in practice and your airbag goes off and you kind of limp away a bit embarrassed, then you don't do the crash in the race that's going to take your opponents with you. And I think that's the line. That's what we're seeing right now, is this situation where every overtake has the chance to be a crash, and every crash has the chance of taking other riders with it because of the dynamics of the falls right now, especially in races.
Again,
Look at the Joan Mir as the example.
Yeah. It's not just about electronics, obviously. As I said before, there's a lot of parts of this package that not just Casey, but a lot of riders on this grid right now disagree with or have different opinions about. And in fact, the ride height devices in particular are a thing that's going away in 2027 as per regulations, but won't be removed earlier for politics reasons and all that. A lot of stuff difficult to go into. Aerodynamics is another, but let's touch upon all that by hitting the important part. This matters for 27, and for the 2027 regulations, and Casey did voice his opinion on those, and that's coming up, and you won't be surprised what it is. But there's a lot of feeling in this paddock that they don't do enough. They don't go far enough in trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve, in rebalancing things apart from the device ban, that it's just sort of a bit band-aidy. What was Casey's take? And I think it's a take you agree with.
Yeah, I mean, he speaks from a position of almost ultimate authority on this, because he's a guy that rode the old school MotoGP bikes, the original 990s, who lived through the transition to 800s, and who has been on a modern 1000cc bike as well as a test rider. So he's seen the move to 800s and the dangers that it brought, essentially, by making bikes that were higher revving and caused high sides as a result, as opposed to the kind of the crash that they were designed to get rid of. That's not going to happen with these bikes, we think, because of the way that they've changed the rules regarding the new specific engine format that's coming with it.
The 850.
The 850.
Yeah.
That's not going to be super high revving because it's keeping some of the engine dimensions the same. But as Casey says, the bikes are going to be lighter, and lighter bikes mean that while the aero is still there to cause some of the problems that we've already had with the corner exit and things like that, there's still only going to be one place to overtake. Now the bikes are going to be lighter. Being on the brakes is going to make even more difference whenever it comes to these do or die lunges. And really, we're not solving any of the problems that we have.
There's an aero reduction, but it's a reduction in dimension. It's not a zero. It's sort of the homologation windows are opening up a bit more than right now, but it's not. I would say it's a pretty soft reduction. You still get a lot of freedom in what you do. It's just a dimensional thing. So they do want to keep it an integral. They do want to keep aero creativity an integral part of MotoGP, which Casey Stoner would say, and many current MotoGP riders would say, other would disagree, is a bad idea, because they don't like what the aero does to the racing. They don't particularly like what the aero does to how the competition looks, to who benefits, who doesn't benefit.
The point that Casey made, and I like it as well, is he was here for the last big cost reduction era of MotoGP, the end of the financial recession, whenever manufacturers were leaving and the series was trying to find a way to do things cheaper. We then forgot that happened, lost the institutional memory of having to cost cut, and allowed aerodynamics to flourish, which is the single most expensive door that we could have opened. We are, he made a lot of references to MotoGP making the mistakes that Formula One made 10 years ago and are now moving away from, but that MotoGP are only making right now in terms of cost, in terms of dirty air causing more turbulent race or bad racing, these big gaps between riders, all of these issues that they made, he thinks we're making as they've stopped.
So Casey said he'd be happy to, advise, not to govern necessarily, but to advise. He feels that currently, what he says isn't necessarily being listened to, and he obviously has no official capacity here as an advisor or anything. He just, he's talking to the media. He's a former rider talking to the media. Do you have any optimism? I mean, we're undergoing a change of ownership here, of championship ownership. Do you feel this is going to get sorted out, or is the timing a little concerning?
I mean, I don't see any way to sort it out. That's the fundamental problem. We have this bizarre structure. I think anyone else looking in from any other sport would think that our governing structure is bizarre, because a single vote in the MSMA, the Motorsport Manufacturers Association, can veto any rule change. Can you imagine if any one team in Premiership football could do away with VAR tomorrow?
Yeah.
It just would never ever be allowed to happen. And we've got that system. We've got that weird rule. And the only way that it can change, and I guess the good thing is that it can change in the medium term, is that whenever it comes to the new agreements that are being signed with the teams for 27 and onwards, the new if you want to call it MotoGP equivalent of the F1 Concord Agreement, then they have to do away with that veto power in the MSMA. That's the only way that we can see realistic change and more dynamic change, like a lot of people want, like F1 already has, where things like ride height devices can be banned in a very short period of time instead of waiting 5 years to do it, essentially.